Y'all, something just got ripped wide open, and I need every single one of you to stop what you are doing right now, because what just got leaked about these so-called No Kings protests is gonna make your jaw drop clean off your face and hit the floor like a bag of wet feed corn. A Fox News investigative journalist did the numbers, and what she found is that there are about 500 organizations behind these No Kings protests, and they want to call it grassroots. It is 100% AstroTurf. 500 organizations. Now let me put that in terms even a 5-year-old at a Whataburger counter could understand. That ain't a movement, y'all. That is a corporation. That is a machine. That is the most expensive fake farmers market you have ever seen in your life. The flagship rally, the big one, the main event, the one they filed all the permits for up in St. Paul, Minnesota, that was coordinated by a group called Indivisible, a national Democratic political advocacy organization funded by none other than billionaire George Soros. Now, here is what I need you to sit with for just a second. These protesters showed up with signs that said, "No Kings" and "End Billionaire Rule." They were out there hollering about how rich people got too much power. And the whole dang thing was bankrolled by one of the richest and most politically powerful men on the entire planet. You cannot make this up. That is like a Whataburger boycott being funded by Whataburger. It does not add up, and somewhere deep down, even they know it. Soros's Open Society foundations have awarded $7.61 million in grants to Indivisible since the organization started in 2017. $7.61 million. That is not a donation, friend. That is a purchase order. When somebody wires that kind of money into an organization year after year after year, they own the direction that wagon is headed. And the wagon this time was headed straight down the street toward your city, waving signs about how they are fighting for the little guy, while the billionaire who funded the whole show was probably sitting somewhere real comfortable. But hold on, because it gets a whole lot worse. And this is the part the mainstream media is doing everything they can to keep you from hearing. Fox News Digital identified key participation by a network of radical socialist and communist organizations funded by a man named Neville Roy Singham, an American tech tycoon and avowed communist living in China. Over nearly a decade, Singham has financed a constellation of activist institutions that promote revolutionary socialist politics, including the People's Forum in New York, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Answer Coalition, and Code Pink. Now I want you to hear that again real slow. An American man who sold his tech company, moved to China, and now spends his time and his money pushing revolutionary communism back onto American soil. That ain't a conspiracy theory, partner. That is a federal investigation waiting to happen, and it already kind of is. Neville Roy Singham sold his IT consulting company in 2017 for $785 million, moved to Shanghai, and was the focus of a New York Times investigation that unveiled his alleged connections to the Chinese Communist Party and his determination to finance extremist groups to advance his radical ideology. The Times reported that Singham has funneled over $250 million to dark money organizations in the United States with little to no footprints. $250 million, y'all. Flowing through organizations so shadowy they are listed at UPS mailbox addresses. And this money is showing up at your city's protest, right there on Main Street, with little red signs printed the night before by people who believe in the same ideology that has starved and imprisoned hundreds of millions of people across history. Posts circulating among socialist activist networks included messaging that said, "It is the time to go out and join the people. Get out our revolutionary message in front of them and turn a day of protest into long-term gains for the people's movement." That is straight out of a Marxist playbook, and I ain't just saying that for effect. That language, that exact strategy of embedding radical movements inside bigger, more sympathetic protests to radicalize them from the inside out, that is Mao Zedong's doctrine word for word. It is called the People's War Strategy, and they are not even trying to hide it. At the No Kings rally in New York City, demonstrators waved communist flags. And separately, protesters were seen chanting, "Only one solution, communist revolution," with hammer and sickle flags in Times Square. Now somebody needs to explain to me real slow how you show up to a protest about freedom and democracy and you are waving the flag of the most brutal authoritarian system mankind has ever produced. That is like showing up to a fire safety seminar with a flamethrower. It does not compute. Unless, of course, freedom and democracy were never the point. And here is the part that ought to really cook your biscuit. The organizers describe this effort as a decentralized, leaderless movement rooted in democratic ideals, coordinated through a coalition of 300 organizations focused on local action. Leaderless. That is the word they keep using. Leaderless. Friend, when 500 organizations with $3 billion a year in combined revenue all show up to the same place on the same day with matching signs, professionally printed, loaded into cars the night before, that is not leaderless. That is the most expensive leadership money can buy. They just hid the leader. That is not grassroots. That is grass that was grown in a lab, shipped in on a flatbed, and laid down over concrete. Investigative reporter Peter Schweitzer documented how the dark money group Arabella Advisors has funded the organizations behind these No Kings protests by directing $114.8 million to them since 2019. Most Americans have never heard that name. That is by design. You are not supposed to know it. You are supposed to see the signs and hear the chants and think, this is your neighbor who just got fed up. What you are actually seeing is a highly coordinated, massively funded influence operation that has been running for years. The names on the signs change, but the money behind them stays the same. Now, I know somebody out there is going to say, well, Republicans have donors too. And yeah, you are right, they do. But here is the difference, friend. Nobody on the right is standing in Times Square right now chanting about revolution and flying Soviet flags while taking money from a man who lives in communist China and operates through shell companies with fake addresses. That is not a both sides situation. That is a very specific situation with very specific people who have very specific goals. And them goals ain't the ones on the pretty little signs. What you are watching is the oldest trick in the political book. Get real folks to come out, tap into genuine frustration about real things, real cost of living, real worries, and then funnel all of that energy into the hands of people who want something entirely different from what those regular folks showed up for. The regular person at that protest probably just wanted to say their piece, but the machinery behind it wants a revolution. And now you know who paid for it. Y'all, do not let them fool you. When somebody tells you they are fighting billionaires and it turns out a billionaire wrote the check, that dog just won't hunt.